Imagine for a second that you've just pulled off this massive, monumental upset.
Oh, yeah, like a real giant killer moment.
Right, exactly. You're on the Moroccan national team, and you've just gone toe-to-toe with an absolute heavyweight, the Netherlands, and you've actually knocked them out of the World Cup.
Which is just an unbelievable feeling. I mean, the adrenaline is pumping.
Totally. The
Yeah.
fans are euphoric. Your phone is probably blowing up with messages. But then you look at the bracket.
Yeah, reality sets in.
Yeah, and you're told your next opponent is supposedly this much easier draw, Canada.
Right.
So how do you keep your focus? Like, how do you stop yourself from mentally packing your bags for the next round before you've even stepped onto the pitch?
Well, I mean, it is the ultimate psychological trap in sports, you know? You spend all this emotional and physical energy climbing the mountain, fighting tooth and nail, only to, like, trip over a rock on the way down.
Because you stop looking at the path right in front of you.
Exactly.
And that is precisely the perilous scenario facing Morocco right now as they prepare for this knockout stage.
It really is.
So, to figure out how Morocco avoids this trap, we're doing a deep dive into a brilliant tactical teardown from the YouTube channel El Balan Badarija.
It's a fantastic breakdown. Highly recommend it.
It really is. We are going to completely unpack the tactical evolution of this Canadian national team since their 2022 version and really try to discover the exact blueprint Morocco must use to survive this.
Because it is an incredibly dangerous matchup, no matter what the public perception is.
Okay, let's unpack this, because even if you aren't a football manager, or frankly, even if you don't watch football, this is a masterclass in how to dismantle a chaotic high-pressure system.
Yeah, it's basically about finding structural flaws in an intimidating setup.
Exactly. It's a strategy you can apply absolutely anywhere in life, from boardrooms to high-stakes negotiations.
For sure. But to really understand what Morocco is walking into, we have to set the environment first.
Right, the physical reality of the game.
Yeah, because we are talking about a match happening in the United States.
Which is huge.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, Canada is going to enjoy this massive home field advantage.
Right, because of the geographic proximity.
Exactly. The crowd support is going to be incredibly heavily skewed toward them.
Which, in a do-or-die elimination game, I mean, that kind of energy provides a tangible psychological boost.
Oh, totally. It won't feel like a neutral venue at all. It's going to feel like a fortress.
The atmosphere is just going to be deafening.
Yeah.
And I guess that brings us to a major, glaring flaw that Morocco showed in their win against the Netherlands.
Yeah, the red flag.
Right, because they played beautifully, but there was this massive issue with their efficiency.
Oh, their offensive inefficiency was actually pretty alarming.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So against the Netherlands, Morocco's build-up play was frankly a thing of beauty. Like, they reached the final third of the pitch with ease.
I remember that they were flying down the field.
But they wasted so many golden opportunities.
Just completely flubbed them.
Yeah, and I don't just mean they missed goals. I mean, they created a scenario where they were forced to expend massive amounts of physical energy.
Right.
They had to fight all the way back to win because they couldn't finish those early chances.
So, put us on the pitch for a second.
Yeah.
Why is missing a chance so physically draining? I mean, isn't it just like a mental letdown?
Oh, no, it's intensely physical.
Really?
Think about it. When you commit your midfielders and your fullbacks forward to create a scoring chance, and then your striker just misses an easy shot.
The other team gets the ball.
Exactly. The opposing goalkeeper gets the ball and immediately restarts play.
Oh, I see.
So now your entire team, who just sprinted 50 yards forward, has to immediately turn around and sprint 50 yards back to defend a counterattack.
Well, yeah, that is brutal.
Do that 3 or 4 times, and your legs are completely gone by the 70th minute.
So in knockout football, where the margins are razor thin, that's dangerous.
Missing easy chances against a highly organized team is basically a death sentence.
Which, that actually reminds me of that concerning match Morocco played against Haiti.
Oh, right, the Haiti game.
Yeah, because in the first half of that game, Morocco showed this really dangerous arrogance, I thought.
They definitely had a swagger to them.
Yeah, like an overconfidence. They were missing chances left and right,
Yeah.
and it almost cost them dearly before they finally woke up.
It was a very close call.
So are we looking at a situation here where Morocco's biggest opponent isn't actually Canada, but like their own post-victory hangover?
This raises an important question about the psychology of respecting your opponent.
Right.
Because when a team starts believing their own hype, their fundamental discipline just slips.
Like taking shortcuts.
Exactly. A midfielder takes that extra, unnecessary touch on the ball to look flashy.
Or winger doesn't sprint back quite as hard on defense.
Yeah, they assume their raw talent will just bail them out. But against a team with Canada's intensity,
It won't fly.
not at all. Any lack of respect, any drop in concentration from the very first whistle will be punished instantly.
So, if Morocco's biggest enemy is a lack of focus, what exactly happens the second they switch off?
Oh, they get swamped.
Because Canada isn't going to politely wait for them to get their heads in the game.
Yeah.
What is the physical reality of Canada's attacking identity here?
Well, the source laid out 5 distinct elements, and honestly, the way it's described, it's like an avalanche.
An avalanche. I love that.
It is the perfect way to visualize it. It's this highly fluid, relentlessly aggressive machine that just completely overwhelms you.
Okay, let's break down those 5 elements. What's number 1?
First, they have a highly organized buildup from the back.
Okay.
Their center backs will split very wide to stretch the field, and a defensive midfielder actually drops down between them.
To form a triangle.
Exactly. This creates a stable 3-man base to break the opponent's first line of pressure using really quick, sharp, short passes.
Okay, hold on. I need to push back on this a bit because I know they are also perfectly willing to just launch long balls over the top to their strikers.
They do that, yes.
So isn't that contradictory? Like, how can you be a team that relies on organized, short-passing buildup, but also just boots it down the field?
Well, it sounds contradictory until you look at the mechanism of their tactical flexibility.
Okay, explain that.
They prefer the short passes, right. They want to draw you forward.
They want you to press them.
Exactly. But the moment you press them too hard and commit too many of your players to steal the ball, they don't stubbornly stick to short passes.
Right, because that would risk a fatal turnover near their own goal.
Spot on. They instantly recognize that you've left space behind you, and they exploit it with a long ball. They use the short passes as bait.
So the short passes are the cheese in the mousetrap.
Perfectly said.
Got it. Okay, so what's the second element of this avalanche?
Relentless positional swapping.
Which sounds exhausting to defend.
Oh, if you are a Moroccan defender playing against Canada, your head must be constantly on a swivel. Nobody stands still. Nobody. The players who are technically strikers will drop deep into the midfield. The wingers will suddenly cut hard into the center of the pitch.
Yeah.
And the midfielders will just sprint past the strikers to crash the penalty box.
It's like playing a high-speed shell game.
It really is.
Like if I'm a defender and my job is to guard the striker, but the striker is suddenly standing in the midfield, do I follow him and leave a hole in my defense?
Or do you stay put and let him roam free?
Exactly. That's a nightmare.
It completely destroys traditional man-to-man marking because it forces defenders to constantly communicate and pass off assignments at a sprinting pace.
Which leads to mistakes.
Always. And the third element actually amplifies this chaos.
Which is?
Extreme width.
Okay, meaning they play very wide.
Right. Canada's fullbacks, the wide defenders, push incredibly high up the sidelines. They basically become extra wingers.
So they are attacking with a ton of width.
By stretching the game as wide as mathematically possible, they force the opposing defensive line to stretch out like a rubber band.
And what happens when you stretch a rubber band?
It snaps, or in this case, the middle gets thin.
You get gaping holes right in the center of the field.
Precisely. And once they pry open those holes in the middle, that triggers the fourth element. Yeah. Vertical urgency.
Vertical urgency, meaning they go straight for the goal.
Yes. When a Canadian midfielder gets the ball in that newly opened space in the center and has a second of time, they do not hold possession just to look pretty.
They aren't padding their passing stats.
Not at all. Their first instinct, which is drilled into them, is to immediately look for a line-breaking vertical pass right through the heart of the defense.
They just drive a wedge straight into the crack.
Yes. And that direct philosophy fuels the fifth element, their lethal transitions.
Oh, that's what we're talking.
Lightning fast. When Canada wins the ball back from the opponent, they don't, slowly jog into an attacking formation.
Right, they don't reset.
No, they flip a switch. It often takes them only about 3 passes to go from winning the ball in their own half to standing inside the opponent's penalty box.
Wow. But here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Yeah.
Because according to the source material, when they actually get all those players into the penalty box, their strategy changes from what you might normally expect.
Oh, the cutbacks.
Exactly. Instead of just lofting traditional high crosses into the area and hoping a tall guy heads it in, Canada floods the box to create total confusion, and they heavily utilize what's called a cutback.
Which is devastating.
So explain to the listener why a cutback is so incredibly difficult to defend.
Well, a cutback exploits the pure physics of human momentum.
Okay.
Imagine you are a Moroccan center back, right? You are sprinting full speed toward your own goal because Canada is counterattacking.
So my momentum is carrying me backward toward my own net.
Right. And a Canadian player gets deep down the side of the field near the goal line.
Okay.
Instead of crossing the ball high in the air across the goal, they drill a hard ground pass backward in the exact opposite direction you are currently running.
Right to the edge of the penalty area. And because of physics, you literally physically cannot stop your momentum and change direction fast enough to get back to it.
Your ankles will break trying to stop that fast.
It's brilliant.
And because Canada commits so many players forward, a midfielder, a winger, a fullback, all arriving at different speeds.
That's always someone there.
Always. There is almost always a late-arriving Canadian player who is completely unmarked, running perfectly onto that backward pass, just ready to smash it into the net.
Okay, I gotta say, that sounds utterly terrifying to defend against.
It's a nightmare for any backline.
But football is a two-way game.
Very true.
If Canada is committing that many bodies forward to execute these cutbacks and high-speed attacks, what on earth happens when they inevitably lose the ball?
It's a great question because they transition from total fluid attack to a rigid defensive structure in the blink of an eye.
How do they manage that?
Their initial reaction is what's called a 5-second swarm.
5-second swarm, okay.
Put yourself in the shoes of a Moroccan midfielder for a second. You've just intercepted a pass. You take a breath, look down at the ball, and before you can even look up to scan the field,
3 Canadian players are already on me.
sprinting full speed right at you.
Wow. 5 seconds of pure claustrophobic panic.
Yes. It's a highly aggressive counterpress, totally designed to suffocate you and win the ball back instantly.
Right, before you can even formulate a plan.
But here's the key to it all. They are highly disciplined.
Meaning they know when to stop.
Exactly. If that 5-second swarm doesn't work, if you actually manage to shield the ball and keep possession, Canada instantly calls off the dogs.
So they don't just chase you aimlessly all over the field.
No, the whole team immediately sprints back and forms a highly compact mid-block.
Okay, let's define that for the listeners. A mid-block, meaning they set up shop in the middle of the field, leaving the spaces near the goals mostly empty.
Right. The space between their defensive line and their midfield line becomes incredibly tight.
How tight?
Maybe only 10 or 15 yards of space total. And sometimes, if they're under extreme pressure, they will even drop their wingers back to form a 5-man defensive line.
That's a lot of bodies.
They guard spaces on the pitch, not specific players. It's a very strict zonal defense.
Wait. I need to stop you right there.
Sure.
Because if Canada is defending zones and just sitting in this super compact, tight block in the middle of the field, doesn't that just invite Morocco to hold the ball and dictate the entire game?
You would think so, right?
Yeah. If I'm Morocco and you've packed the center, I'm just going to calmly pass it around the outside of your block, keep possession, and totally tire you out. Why is Canada giving up that space?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of their strategy, Canada actually wants you to pass it to the outside.
They want you to.
Yeah, that passive-looking mid-block is actually bait.
Bait. How so?
Think of it like a basketball zone defense.
Okay.
You pack the paint so tightly that the opposing team feels completely compelled to pass the ball out wide to the perimeter.
Right, because that's where the open floor is.
Exactly. In football, Canada packs the center, so you naturally pass to the sidelines.
Ah.
But the exact moment the ball travels to the sideline, Canada springs a trap.
What kind of trap?
Their fullback, their winger, and their closest central midfielder will all suddenly swarm the ball carrier at once.
Ah, so they use the actual sideline boundary as an extra defender.
Exactly. They create the suffocating 3-on-1 situation against the touchline.
Wow.
You think you found open space on the wing, and suddenly you are trapped in a phone booth with 3 angry defenders and literally nowhere to go.
Man, they funnel you right into the kill zone.
It's incredibly effective.
Okay, so this system sounds impenetrable on paper. I mean, they attack with blistering speed, they swarm you the second they lose it, and if that fails, they build a wall and trap you on the wings.
It's intimidating for sure.
But, no system is perfect. Every machine has a weak point. What are the structural cracks here? Like, what is the actual blueprint for a Moroccan victory?
The blueprint starts by taking Canada's greatest attacking weapon and turning it into a fatal weakness.
And what's that?
Those fullbacks.
Ah, the wide defenders.
Remember we said Canada's fullbacks push incredibly high up the pitch to act like extra wingers.
Right, to stretch the field.
Well, basic physics dictates you can't be in two places at once.
Obviously.
So when those fullbacks push up that high, they leave massive, empty acres of grass behind them.
So they're completely exposed on the flanks.
Yes. If Morocco can just keep their composure and survive that initial 5-second panic swarm when they win the ball, they can launch quick vertical passes directly into those empty zones.
Before the Canadian fullbacks have time to sprint all the way back.
Exactly. You don't attack the defense, you attack the space they vacated.
So it's about lightning-fast counterattacks into the wide areas.
Yes.
But what happens when Canada's already sitting in that compact zonal defense? Like, how do you break down that mid-block without falling into their sideline traps?
Well, this is where Morocco's specific personnel becomes the ultimate antidote.
Okay, who are we talking about?
You need players who can basically break the rules of a zonal defense. Players like Brahim Diaz, Galala Khanous, Azzedine Ounahi, and Ismail Saibari.
Right, highly technical players.
These are players with incredibly high tactical intelligence.
Okay, break that down for me. Like, how does a smart player break a zone?
So, a strict zonal defense relies heavily on predictability.
Right.
A Canadian defender is tasked with guarding a very specific square of grass. If an attacker walks into that square, the defender guards him.
Makes sense.
And if the attacker leaves that square, the defender just passes him off to a teammate in the next zone.
Right, keeping the structure intact.
But players like Diaz and Ounahi, they are absolute masters at finding what we call the gray areas.
The gray areas?
Yeah, the tiny seams right on the border between two different defender zones.
Oh, wow.
Usually right between the midfield line and the defensive line.
So they position themselves exactly on the dividing line between two players.
Exactly. And this causes massive cognitive overload for the defense.
I can imagine.
Imagine you are the Canadian center back, Diaz is standing right on the edge of your zone, and the midfielder's zone.
So whose job is it to guard him?
Exactly. Do you step out of your defensive line to go guard him? If you do, you leave a gaping hole behind you that another Moroccan forward can run right into.
Because if you stay in your line,
Diaz gets the ball with time to turn and run directly at you.
the smart player ruins the structural integrity of the zone just by standing in the wrong spot.
It is brilliant.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
It's using the rigidity of their own rules against them to cause hesitation.
Spot on.
But, you know, there has to be a physical element to breaking this down, too, because you mentioned Canada plays with this high-octane swarming style.
Yeah.
They cannot be easy to sustain for 90 minutes.
Oh, it isn't. The fatigue factor is a very real vulnerability for Canada.
So they get tired.
Playing a 5-second swarm and constantly sprinting back into a mid-block, it takes a monumental physical toll.
So what does Morocco need to do?
If Morocco can be patient, hold the ball, and just force Canada to constantly shift their entire defensive block horizontally, like left to right, right to left.
So eventually those Canadian players are going to hit a wall.
Yes.
So there's a specific window Morocco needs to aim for.
Yes. The final 30 minutes of the match are extremely critical.
Last half hour.
If you make Canada chase the ball horizontally for an hour, their legs will get heavy.
That 5-second swarm won't be quite as terrifying.
Right. The fullbacks will be a step slower getting back on defense.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly, those tight 10-yard spaces between their defensive lines, they will stretch into massive gaps that players like Diaz can drive right through.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most shocking vulnerability in Canada's setup from the source material.
The glass jaw.
Yeah, the glass jaw. Because they commit so heavily to their offensive avalanche, they frequently leave only 2 defenders all the way at the back near their goalkeeper.
It's an incredibly arrogant gamble.
2 defenders. That's insane.
They are mathematically outnumbered at the back, betting entirely that their 5-second counterpress up front will stop you from ever playing a forward pass.
What if it failed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If just one Canadian player is half a second late to their pressing assignment, or if a Moroccan midfielder manages to thread one brilliant line-breaking pass through the pressure,
The whole thing falls apart.
the entire Canadian system shatters instantly. Morocco will suddenly find themselves running totally free in a 3-on-2 or even a 3-on-1 counterattack.
So what does this all mean? Like, if we synthesize this entire tactical blueprint, Morocco needs 3 key things to survive and advance.
Let's hear it.
1, extreme mental discipline, to not underestimate Canada, to not get arrogant, and to weather that terrifying early pressure without making a fatal mistake.
Yes.
2, They need to launch ruthless vertical counterattacks into the wide empty spaces left behind Canada's aggressive fullback.
Absolutely.
And 3, they need the tactical patience to use their smart players in those gray areas, move the ball side to side, and literally exhaust the Canadian team until their physical structure collapses in the final 30 minutes.
That is a flawless summary.
Well, thank you.
Canada is a highly evolved, deeply dynamic threat. They will absolutely punish any Moroccan complacency.
For sure.
But their aggressive, high-flying style is inherently a double-edged sword.
Because it leaves them exposed.
Exactly. It leaves them highly vulnerable to intelligent movement between the lines and fast counterattacks, particularly late in the game when the lactic acid builds up and the mental processing slows down.
It really is a fascinating clash of styles.
Yeah.
Chaos and aggression versus intelligence and patience.
You know, what's fascinating here is that specific detail we just discussed about Canada leaving only 2 defenders back.
Oh, yeah.
It makes you wonder about the deeper psychology of tactical setups. Like, is this mathematical disadvantage, leaving your defense completely and utterly exposed, actually a deliberate psychological weapon?
Wait, how do you mean? How is being exposed a weapon?
Well, think about it from the perspective of the Moroccan manager.
Okay.
You know Canada is going to flood your penalty box with bodies, right?
Yeah, the avalanche.
Human instinct screams at you to pull every single one of your players back to defend for your life.
Obviously, yeah.
So do you even dare to leave your own attackers forward near the midfield line to exploit their empty back line? Or do you panic, submit to their pressure, and pull everyone into your own penalty box?
Oh, wow. I see what you mean.
Sometimes projecting reckless vulnerability is actually the ultimate form of intimidation.
That's wild.
It dares the opponent to be brave, knowing that if they try to counterattack and fail, you have enough bodies forward to completely crush them.
Wow. Projecting reckless vulnerability as intimidation. That is a really wild thought to chew on.
It is.
It turns the whole tactical battle into an absolute test of nerve for Morocco's squad. Like, who blinks first?
Precisely.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today. Thank you for joining us on this look into the tactical chessboard.
It was a fun one.
Definitely. And the next time you sit down to watch a football match, or honestly, the next time you are trying to figure out how to break down any complex, aggressive system in your own life.
Like a stressful project or a tough negotiation.
Exactly. Look for these exact structural battles.
Look for the empty spaces left behind the aggressor.
Yeah, look for the gray areas where you can cause cognitive overload. And remember, sometimes the opponent that looks like an easy win on paper, well, they are actually a beautifully designed trap just waiting to be sprung. See you next time.